Hey Kelly, how are you, Kelly? Round two is on the way. Yeah, I was just telling people like, hey, let's get this going. Keep it short.
I'll see what I can do.
It's a piece of cake.
City Public Schools for the regular business meeting of the Board of Directors for January 22nd. This meeting is now called to order. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Here.
Mr. Abarca,
Present.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Here.
Dr. Jones,
Here.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Here.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Here. Thank you. I invite my colleagues to look at the agenda. It would be in order to receive a motion
So
for
moved.
acceptance of the agenda.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
I'm not going to get there. Ms. Manser,
Yes?
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Aye.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The first item on the agenda this evening is public comment. We have 3 individuals who have indicated that they wish to address the board this evening. Public comments are limited to 3 minutes per speaker. So to begin, the chair now recognizes DeMonte Rochester of the District Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Board Member and President Chair of Board, Patty Manser, and Board members, Dr. Bedell. Last Wednesday, we had an opportunity to have our first DAC meeting of the year for 2020. It was very productive. Like, majority of our meetings are going to be productive, and now we have a public comment section where we offer different schools to come up and tell about what's going on at their schools, or parents to come up and tell about what they're doing in the community, or different things to come back to tell you guys what our parents are doing and how it's going to be beneficial and better to DAC. So thank you for your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much. The chair now recognizes Mr. Steve Burton, but I do not see Mr. Burton here this evening, so the next individual for public comment is Mr. Tom Love. Welcome, Mr. Love.
Thank you. It's good to be here tonight, and I hope we all get home safe. They don't have this in Houston. My parents lived down in Spring, Texas for 15 years. I know some of you spent some time in Houston. But I'm excited tonight because I've sent an email to our attorney, Mr. Thornton, concerning a law that requires 5-year-old kindergarten students that are going into first grade, that they're required to complete kindergarten. These are August birthday children. And I'm excited because if they receive what they're required to receive, a second year of kindergarten, they're going to be a year older. They're going to go, instead of being at the youngest and the bottom of the class, they're going to go to the top. And then they're going to go above that because they're going to have another year of school. So those children are going to do great. Now, I'm going to, upon advice here of DeMonte, send all of you a copy of this email that I sent to Mr. Thornton. It's not an option to allow these children to continue on and fail. They have to complete it in order to start a year earlier than it's allowed in Missouri. It's only allowed in Kansas City and St. Louis because we have populations over 300,000. It didn't really make sense to me, but I'm excited that we have that so we can at least get a start on seeing what a K1, K2 program would do, and also what would happen if we actually allowed the kindergarten and first grade teachers to be in charge once again. Years ago, the school board made this social promotion policy and put it in, and they didn't realize that you should not do that in kindergarten and first grade. You need to make sure that the child's ready to succeed socially, emotionally, age-wise. We were actually attempting to graduate 40% of the students as 17-year-olds. Now it's around a third, but there's no reason for that. we could have some of the best prepared students in the country, at least in that summer birthday category, if we allowed them, put them in, everybody in K1, and say, we're going to promote you to K2. And but we're not going to hold you back. If you're ready to go into first grade, we'll go ahead and put you there. And it's all funded already. It's all paid for by the state of Missouri. In fact, we could do that for any student who's not ready to go. There's no reason for it. We can actually close the education gap. It's all funded, and it's kind of a win-win-win situation, because those students will do better academically. They're going to do better athletically, because a lot of parents just do it just for their child to be a year older and do great in sports, and socially. So it's kind of a no-brainer. Now, do I have any more time? May I?
You have used your 3 minutes,
Okay.
Mr. Love.
Okay, I'd like to say one last thing. I sure would appreciate if you guys would pass a rule like took place several years ago and allow questions from the school board members to the people that have concerns for the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Love. The next item on the agenda is the Treasurer's Report for the presentation of this evening's Revenue and Expenditure Report. The Chair recognizes Board Treasurer Manny Abarca.
Well, Dr. Bedell's amazing CFO is currently missing, so I'm going to do my best as she defends our dollars in Jeff City. So, moving to page 2. Simple. Slides aren't changing yet. Oh. Thank you. So, wanted to focus your attention on a couple things. First, in the expenditures category, the line revenue over under expenditures, you'll notice that $8 million under there. And so one of the points that Lynn and I had talked about focusing on is this is due in part for the individuals utilizing the budget that has been allocated to them and not going over, but also underspending in some of those categories. And so that is why we are in such good position. There is still a pending question out there about to that great expense, and so we'll get back to that when we get her here. Moving on to the revenue side, the most important thing that I think we can indicate out of this entire budget report is our current tax receipt at this point. We are currently at 35.1% collected. And this is our largest revenue line, and there'll be a slide later on that talks about that difference there. And so, as mentioned, this is 80.77% of our total budget, and for us to be in that place is somewhat concerning. So, moving on to page 4, you'll see that overall we are at 22.5%, which is halfway to the mark, and so we've still got funds to collect, but this is, again, something that will adjust within the next 2 months. And so this is not necessarily cause for concern yet, but as we continue to receive revenues from the state and Fed, this will modify. Similar to the next page on page 5, we are halfway there. Again, we'll have an adjustment come in the next few months. So on page 6 is the total pie chart here. You'll see again, local revenues, $207 million, and that's that nearly 81% total. So we have some reason to begin to challenge where we're at positionally based upon the tax revenues collected. So going to the expenditure side, you'll see that, and our apologies here, this is something that I wasn't able to communicate with Linda to compare years here to give you a percentage to percentage by year. But you can see basically most of these funds should be around 45% total expense. And so as you compare to these, some over and under, depending upon their things, will give you the sense as to where we're at in the budget process. So overall, salaries were at 41.5, fringe benefits were at 33.7, and then moving on to purchase services on page 8. A couple notes that we wanted to keep your attention on. Some of these areas, and I'm going to try my best here. I'm not going to blame Bill completely. We talked about this actually before in terms of the projection of line items and per budget and that predictability component. But otherwise, you can again compare your averages at this point to around 45 to 55-ish%. And all of those line items that are dramatically over are areas that we need to focus on either reining in their budgets or identifying why we're blowing through some of these budgets so quickly. So couple line items here that Linda has identified: legal services, repairs and maintenance, and then you can see some of the others: property insurance, liability insurance. These are some lines that we're going to continue to monitor to identify any issues that we need to adjust and plan for the next budget year. So moving on to page 9. As I think I mentioned in previous months, we talked about the reclassification of dollars that are sometimes combined in previous months' budget reports. One line item that Linda wanted me to bring to your attention is 6411, 6412, were previously combined in the last budget process, and so her team is trying to adjust these line items to pull things apart to create more codes that'll show you line by line why certain expenses are that way. And so she's still, I think, perfecting this one, because as you can see, we're at 338% over. So that will likely split again, and we can adjust and see that in previous or in future months. So she wanted me to bring up that some of this coding changes is due to DESI rules now, and so we're accommodating to those changes. One note that we're still researching, which I, again, want to bring to your attention: there are some of these line items within expenditures here that should probably be at the 100% mark, which are not currently. Some of those things like textbooks, library books, resource materials purchase, music supplies, art supplies, we have questions around those things because those expenses likely should be there before school starts, not in the middle or at the end of school starting, to make sure our students have the necessary supplies and materials that they need. So that's something we're still trying to figure out where in the process we are into fixing that system. If it's teachers not requesting, those with the authority to approve or not approving, wherever those faults are, Linda and her team are trying to identify that as well. Moving on to page 10, it's the overall pie chart. You'll still see salaries and benefits are our largest expenditure, as every month. Moving on to the 11th slide, you'll see that these are our investments that are coming to maturity, and you see that one has dropped off that we have actually received given that accommodation, and you'll see these continue to change as we move forward in the next few months. This is the next slide is one of the most important ones that we wanted to draw to your attention. This is our the effect of the current property tax process and collection concerns. And so basically out of all of this, you'll see the comparable years where we were and where we were at in terms of overall collection and at collection up to this point. And what Linda wanted me to make sure and make for you to all, thank you, for me to prove to you all to review is that $2.1 million, we were ahead in the previous years, and that's not where we're at right now. And so we are behind in terms of collection at this current date. And so we're going to continue to monitor because some of these things may adjust month to month based upon when the disbursements come out from the county. But at this point, as we were assumed to receive this windfall, we are actually behind in what the collection should be at this point by $2.1 million. So that is my report at this point. Good luck. Here we go.
Mr. Hogan?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Treasurer, thank you for the report. Quick question. Can you go back to slide 9 for me? So you mentioned the continued codes being broken down. Is that across all these different buckets? So, for example, capital outlay, those codes are continuing to be broken apart as well? Okay. We might log a question specific to 6544 under capital outlay, which is technology software. It's 141% over. and software technology in general can sort of balloon in cost really, really rapidly. So I'd be interested to know from Ms. Quinley when we think we'll have that further broken down, and then what is the overrun, if that indeed is what it is associated with.
I'm gonna, if you're good with that, expand those to all the categories that are over 100%, that shouldn't be totally.
I have a question that, just for future discussion, it could be at a next meeting or at some time in the near future. I'm very interested in knowing how we are doing in terms of our Medicaid collections. I know there have been a lot of issues at the state level regarding students and families losing their Medicaid coverage. And so I would just be interested in, I don't know if this is would be what we might expect generally, but I would be interested in a report on that from a financial standpoint.
And is that, just to clarify, to make sure I understand that part, is that fees collected based upon children served, probably?
Yes,
Okay.
and so what I'm, want to be sure of is, are we in line with where we would have been in prior years? And if we are not collecting at the same rate, is it because we have more children who have lost eligibility, or is it just that there's reduced services? So I'd be interested in the
4-year, probably comparables is my guess, or at least
Okay.
probably 2 or 3.
So if you could just,
And we can definitely get that answer, but I will tell you that that has been a concern around the eligibility piece. We had tens of thousands of families that actually lost coverage, and I can tell you, once we run that data and we look at it from year to date, that's going to be a big piece of what potentially has occurred in our ability to be able to collect from a Medicaid standpoint. So we'll get that information though.
are there any other questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much. The next item of business on the agenda is to make an appointment by the Kansas City Public Schools Board of Directors to the Kansas City Public Schools Retirement Systems Board of Trustees. As the board is aware, the KCPS board is authorized to make 4 appointees to the retirement board. At this time, we have one seat that needs to be appointed. Mr. Carl Evans has served in that seat previously and has expressed his desire to be reappointed to the Kansas City Public Schools Retirement Board. That would be for a term of 4 years. We will have additional appointments to make, the next one being at the end of this calendar year. But at this time, it would be in order for us to receive a motion to approve the appointment of Carl Evans as KCPS Board appointee to the Public Schools Retirement System Board of Trustees.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any debate on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, it would be, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
No.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. There is a majority in favor, and Carl Evans' appointment is approved. One additional comment on this component as we move forward with appointments. The Kansas City Public Schools Board, in our prior discussions, has agreed to enact a scheduled process by which we will solicit candidates and applicants for consideration, conduct interviews, and then make appointments at that time. The next appointment that must be made will have to be completed in December of this year. So we will lay out a schedule for and a timeline for that next process. Thank you, everyone. The next item on the agenda are ad hoc committee reports. Do either of the ad hoc committee chairs wish to report to the board this evening? Ms. Wolfsey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to report out from the Government Relations Committee. As many of you probably already know, the legislature convened on January 8th. So things have been ripping and roaring since that day. We met as a committee on January 14th. I just will quickly remind everyone of the priorities we have at the state level: increased funding and resources towards mental health, increasing and differentiating teacher pay, equitable funding in regards to local revenues, and the same transparency and accountability for all schools, charter and traditional. So I just want to let you know that Ms. Quinley has already testified twice in the first 2 weeks. Once was today about the equitable funding legislation that was before the committee, and I forget, Ways and Means, I believe, is the committee, and also around property tax assessment a week ago. We're still working to launch our legislative update email, and I would encourage anyone that wants to be kept in the loop as to what we're going to be following this session to send an email to board@kcpublicschools.org with the subject legislative update list, and just put in the memo, please add me to your list. And that is the end of our report.
Thank you. Are there any additional reports? All right, thank you. The next item of business are the report of the superintendent. The chair recognizes Dr. Bedell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We want to start off with our video highlight, and before we run the video, I really do want to commend our in-house communication team. They've done a phenomenal job. We've actually created what is called, is it a green room, Kelly? I mean, so where we're now able to create our own marketing and commercials and things of that nature to promote the various schools in our system. And we have a very talented team, and what you are getting ready to see is something that we've done in-house as we get ready to promote our school district. So we're ready to do the video highlight.
We are KCPS.
Kindergarten is great at Kansas City Public Schools.
I know they have really good teachers. I know this is a great school.
They teach them stuff that I thought my kids would never be able to know at the age of 5.
Since deciding to send our kiddos to a neighborhood school, we've become even more of a part of our community.
Now is the time to enroll your future kindergartner for the new school year. Visit enrollkc.org today.
I love Southeast because of the culture, the band program, and restorative justice.
I love Southeast because of the academics, sports, and students.
I love Southeast because of the people, the energy, and the advanced classes.
It's not alike. I love Southeast because the students here at Southeast are full of potential and they believe in achieving anything.
We are Southeast.
Southeast.
We stand shoulder to shoulder.
Join the Southeast family. Enroll today.
I chose manual because it's challenging and fun, and it can help me with college.
I chose manual because I wanted to get a jump start in my career with culinary arts.
I chose manual to acquire skills I'd use in real life.
I chose manual because I want to be an ER doctor, and being an EMT is my first step.
Kickstart your future today at Manual Career and Technical Center. Manual is open for all 11th and 12th grade students in both Kansas and Missouri. Learn more today at enrollkc.org/manual or call 816-418-5200.
The desire to create lives within each of us. From Grammy-winning producers and musicians, to NBA stars, to Navy admirals and Medal of Honor recipients, to internationally renowned artists, and beloved local muralists, Paseo graduates have been creating their own success, their own history, their own legacy since 1926. Now it's your time. Create your future. at Paseo Academy of Fine and Performing Arts. Learn more at enrollkc.org/Paseo.
One of the things that we shared with Ms. Waiter when she came on board was we wanted to make sure that just from an equity standpoint, that when we go out, we want to highlight everything we have in our system. And we don't want to do it where we're just promoting signature schools only or early childhood centers only. We wanted to make sure that we were intentional around making sure that we promote our neighborhood schools. I mean, there's a lot of great things happening in our neighborhood schools and a lot of hidden gems within our community. So I'm really happy that we're now equipped, that we have the staff to be able to now really move out and promote. And so I just want to thank you all for this work and the products that we're seeing coming out of that division.
Thank you, Dr. Bedell. I think you have the next item of business.
Yes, this is something that's near and dear to my heart, and many of you know that when we started working in this school district back in 2016, and I say we, the team that we've all assembled here, one of the things we said in our strategic plan was that it was critical that we figure out how do we provide safety nets for our students. And we said that those safety nets would come through mentoring. And we have created this mentoring program that honestly, it has taken off beyond what I even expected. I was very unrealistic with Dr. Davis around the number of kids that I wanted covered in the immediate beginning of this, but I think we're growing it now, and we just got to a point where we kind of bottlenecked. We just didn't have the bandwidth, and part of that VOCA grant is going to help us, because I know you were interviewing today, to add some additional staff so that we really can grow this program out. But without having support from community partners, and I know Prime Health is here, and Dr. Wilson is here, and Dr. Davis, I don't know if you want to offer some remarks before we take pictures, but this MOCA mentoring program is something that's near and dear to our hearts. You have 3 men in here that are also serving as MOCA mentors, and it's something that I'm extremely proud of. So, Dr. Davis, I'll pass it over to you. Or is it 4? That's right. I'm sorry. I'm thinking about us on the staff.
Hi, good evening, Dr. Bedell, Board Chair Manser, members of the board, cabinet. The Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said that intelligence plus character is the goal of a true education, and the Kansas City Public Schools Men of Color, Honor, and Ambition, or MOCA, mentoring program aspires to achieve just that. Before I introduce and bring up our featured guest, Dr. Susan Wilson, I do want to acknowledge a couple folks. I don't see grant writer Barbara Wright, but she assisted me with that grant, and I also want to recognize Ms. Evelyn Hill, who coordinates all of our transportation to get these young men to and fro. And I will say, you've probably seen the young men in the vests and ties, so when we presented that, many of the young men didn't have collar shirts, but Ms. Hill went over to Walmart and picked out various sizes to make sure every single young man had a collar shirt in order to tie that tie around, so appreciate all of her efforts in that. I also want to acknowledge our mentors in the room. We have Mr. Ron Jones, MOCA mentor. Of course, you know, Board Member Barker and Superintendent Bedell, and I also serve as a MOCA mentor. And we also have 2 mentees in the room. We have with us, we have Corey Soto, who is a junior at the Early College Academy, and we have Mr. James McGee, who is a MOCA mentee. He is a junior at Lincoln College Preparatory Academy. And so, if I could, I know that Dr. Wilson came in with a fleet of board members from the Prime Health Foundation to do a site visit and learn more about our program. Very thankful that Board Member Barker and Brother Ron Jones over there showed up to assist me in showing some of the successes of the program. And so we're just so pleased to have Dr. Wilson here with us this evening. So, Dr. Wilson, the microphone is yours.
All right, Superintendent Bedell, School Board, and also Dr. Darrell Davis, I'm really pleased to be here tonight because I want you to know that we have a commitment to partnering with the Kansas City Public Schools. You know, when I became chair of the Prime Health Board, and we do healthcare grant making, and so all these years we've been talking about, well, let's help the children, and let's have access to care for everyone. And I said, well, wait a minute. When you look at the data, men of color have some of the worst health outcomes, employment outcomes, criminal justice outcomes that you can ever imagine. And as a healthcare foundation, we would be remiss if we didn't develop a strategy. So under my leadership, I developed a Men of Color grant-making initiative. And that's the grant-making initiative that is funding the MOCA program, which of course we love because not only does it give young black men a sense of community that they need, but it really improves retention. And we know retention is an issue no matter what level of education you look at. Retention is an issue for our young black male. Even at UMKC where I work, retention is an issue. So you're starting early, building that kind of sense of community, building professional skills, building self-esteem. And so that's why Prime Health Board saw it fit to recognize you with this grant money. Now, we're a small grant-making institution. We don't have a lot of money. But stay tuned with us because there'll be an announcement later in the year where we're going to have more money to be able to award to men of color initiatives, because that's how important I think it is. I have a son. I know what he went through. It's a passion of mine, and I'm not letting this go. They already know. So I can't promise anything tonight, but just know we plan to be a long-term partner with the Kansas City, Missouri School District because that's where the need is. So without further ado, who wants to accept this?
Several of us will come up and take a picture with you, but here's what I do want to promise you in front of this board and this public. We will deliver on those expected outcomes from an academic standpoint, from a social and emotional development standpoint, and from a real-world skill development standpoint, teaching these young men how to be able to function in this world at a high level. Yes. And our workshops, everything that we've done, we already see the fruits of the return that we're getting with these investments. So we want to thank you. And look, let's get the picture in. Thank you.
We're going to go in front of the banners over here and take a couple photos. Yep, a couple people are going to take some photos.
Thank you so much, Dr. Wilson. Thank you to the Prime Health Foundation. We are very appreciative of this grant. Thank you for being here this evening, and we are grateful and look forward to working with you.
Awesome. All right. The next item, and I don't know if we move on, we will have, where is she? Ms. Sharnissa Holiday Scott to come up. She's going to provide, and this will actually take care of the last two items under the superintendent's report, a status report on the Kansas City Neighborhood Academy closure, and then sponsorship of Allen Village School, which will also include an update on the upcoming renewal that will take place next year. Oh, I didn't turn them.
Good evening. As Dr. Bedell said, I am providing a status report of the KCNA Closure, Kansas City Neighborhood Academy closure, and the sponsorship of Allen Village School. First, I would like to just remind the board of a few responsibilities of a charter school sponsor, because that is what we serve as here at KCPS in relationship to these schools. So as a charter school sponsor, we are responsible for providing oversight to our charter schools. We are responsible for negotiating contracts with those schools to ensure that we negotiate the expected outcomes for those schools. We negotiate the rights and responsibilities so each party is clear about what is expected of the other. That also includes measures of success, what constitutes not meeting those expectations, and potentially what are the performance consequences. So that is all involved in what's called their charter agreement. Also, as sponsors, we are responsible for evaluating their performance. We monitor compliance, we inform intervention and renewal decisions, and we assure autonomy for those charter schools in which we sponsor. So those are our key responsibilities. In the state of Missouri, and in Kansas City in particular, while there are multiple entities by statute that can sponsor here in Missouri, there are basically three key entities that sponsor. One is the local school district, which that is us. Then we have our university sponsors, our public university sponsors, and then we have schools that are sponsored by the Missouri Charter Public School Commission. I want to remind you that the commission is not the same organization as the Missouri Charter Public School Association. Those are two different organizations. The commission is established by statute, and they're established to be a sponsor just like us. So they are not a regulatory agency that oversees sponsors or oversees all charter schools. They have been statutorily created to be a sponsor just like Kansas City Public Schools. So we are an authorized charter sponsor. We were just evaluated this past year, or in 2019. On October 23rd, we did receive our notification from DESE that KCPS is in full compliance of all of its charter sponsor standards. So that means that we will be evaluated again in 3 years. So by statute, charter sponsors are reevaluated every 3 years according to the standards that have been put in place by DESE for our evaluation process. Currently, we sponsor Allen Village School, and then we are overseeing the closure of Kansas City Neighborhood Academy. Those sponsorship duties do come from my position out of the Office of Collaboration, and so I perform most of those duties. So with the closure of Kansas City Neighborhood Academy, I am required to follow some key foundational processes and procedures for those school closures. What you will see are 6 items, and that is by the Code of State Regulations that DESE has codified to say, sponsor, when you close, you need to monitor these areas. So that's communication, student records, disposition of assets, business and personal records, submission of the final data and reports, and the resolution of any financial obligations of the school. So these all must be done prior to the final closure of the school. It's all part of the process. So for Kansas City Neighborhood Academy, we are almost complete in our process. But just as a reminder, Kansas City Neighborhood Academy, the board voted on March 27th, 2019 to close the school. So the Kansas City Neighborhood Academy is a voluntary closure. It is not a closure that has been initiated by the sponsor, nor is it a closure that is resulting from some kind of school impropriety. It is a voluntary closure that the board looked at the circumstances and the situation, and for them it was financial, and we will touch on those things, their key reasons for closing. But the board made that decision and then notified us. But just to let you see, there is a timeline of some things that have taken place so that you are aware how things have happened and this process is being done. But just to draw your attention to July, we disposed of all the physical assets of the school. So anything that is owned by a closing charter school, you are responsible to dispose of those assets, those physical assets first. And the assets follow the students. The school cannot just randomly choose who to give their assets to. They are required to follow the students because they were purchased with state and federal dollars. And so it is to ensure that those students of that school still will receive a benefit. So that required Kansas City Neighborhood Academy to monitor where the students were enrolling. So throughout the summer, we were monitoring where those students were being enrolled. We were working with the Kansas City Public Schools Admissions Department, as well as Show Me KC Schools. They were assisting us to make sure that the students were finding other schools, and then those schools were the first ones to be identified to partake in our lottery for the assets. Ultimately, we did open it up to anyone. Once we go through our list of where the students are going, it's then we opened it up to any charter school or potentially any district school that would want any of the remaining assets. Also, to draw your attention to currently between November and February, we are having Kansas City Neighborhood Academy's student records, personnel records, and business records digitized. That is a requirement for us, and part of that is to ensure that those records are accessible even once the school and the corporation is dissolved. So I will be maintaining a copy of those records. One of the pluses for Kansas City Neighborhood Academy is that school did use KCPS's student information system. So when it came time for students to enroll in other district schools, many of those records were already in the system, so it was easy to transition those students without having to do paper copies. However, we still get student requests for records from other charter schools, and we still have to be able to provide those requested records to them. So we are required to have them digitized. And then this past December, to continue the regulations of fulfilling all of the reporting, KCNA had an independent audit. So just every public school in Missouri is expected to have an independent audit. Their audit, I attended the board meeting in which the independent auditor presented the audit to the board. The board voted to accept the audit, and it was filed with DESE by the December 31st deadline. And Kansas City Neighborhood Academy did receive a clean audit opinion. So that is a plus. As I mentioned earlier, there were some obstacles that led to KCNA's closure. There were key things, but ultimately they all go back to the low enrollment impacted their school revenue. They were a school that had a neighborhood enrollment, and that was their school model, but their enrollment had always been below their expectations. So when a charter school begins to plan, they set enrollment projections. And for them, their enrollment projections, they had a hard time meeting those. And as we know, for school systems, for public school systems, enrollment and attendance are your biggest drives for revenue. And when you consistently have lower enrollment, and even in the 18-19 school year, they saw growth. However, it was not enough to be able to maintain them financially. And some of those reasons included they had slower than expected housing development. As you know, KCNA was created as a charter school with the partnership of UNI for housing development. Well, that housing development was slow, and it just did not generate that student growth that we were looking for. Also, they had to come to the realization that there are more seats than students in the system. That is something that we have talked about actually quite frequently, not just in reference to KCNA, but there are more seats than there are students in the system. So for them, they had a hard time because you had even opening of new charter schools as well as expansion of charter schools. And so right now they're pulling enrollment from each other. And so they had a hard time filling their seats. They also found that with the ongoing financial difficulties, they didn't have enough that was going to be in reserves. They were just barely going to hit just over that 3% of financial reserves. And for them, they felt like that was not going to be acceptable enough. They wanted to raise another $765,000 in order to remain open, and that they were not able to hit that goal. And then finally, of course, transportation. It's a high cost for a school, for a small school. And then they were, because of their school model, they couldn't offer transportation across the entire Kansas City public education system, like most charter schools. So they were only to be a school-based neighborhood model. So those were the key obstacles that the board continued to look at, and they were just making the decision that we just cannot continue. So that led to the decision of the closure. We are in our final steps of closure. We are projected to be completely closed by the end of April 2020. There are things that when a charter school closes, that it's beyond just the last day students are there. They have to dissolve the corporation. Charter schools are nonprofit corporations according to Missouri statute, so they must go through the dissolution process, the posting to creditors, and the notices. They have to go through that entire process. So KCNA is starting that. We will also have our final audit, independent audit, because Kansas City Neighborhood Academy is functioning as a corporation in the 2020 fiscal year. They will have one final independent audit, and that will be sent to DESE to let them know that they have closed, the finances are finished. According to statute, all charter schools upon closure, any remaining financial assets after you've taken care of all expenditures, all of those, any remaining finances are to be sent to DESE for DESE's distribution. We are not anticipating that Kansas City Neighborhood Academy will have any remaining finances. In order to even fund the closure, they have gotten donations from some generous foundations to help fund this closure. So we are not anticipating any extra funds remaining. I have notified DESE, our DESE representative, in advance. I notified him a few months ago that this is our anticipation. He has also been invited to participate in our transition meetings, so he's attended a few of those. He has also attended KCNA board meetings, because the board of KCNA is still meeting on a monthly basis. So until the school closes, the board still has a responsibility to meet until we are completely finished. So that is the status of Kansas City Neighborhood Academy's closure. Just to also provide, I am providing an Allen Village School sponsor update. As you know, in May 2019, this board voted to accept the role as a sponsor to Allen Village School. And Allen Village School is a K-12 charter school that has been opened about 20 years. So it's not a new school, it's not an inexperienced school. They have approximately 560 students on 2 campuses. They currently in 2019 have an attendance rate of 93.6%, as well as a 92% four-year graduation rate. With our sponsorship, Allen Village School is their own LEA, which that is different than our sponsorship of KCNA. But as their own LEA, that means that they do receive their funds directly from DESE, and we are not a pass-through for them. So with Allen Village School, one of the key things to maintain our relationship and continue to build that. As the sponsor, I meet with them on a monthly basis, at least a monthly basis. We meet, we review data, I address any questions or concerns that the school may have. At this point, we are having an eye towards their renewal. Allen Village School will be up for renewal in the 2020-2021 school year. And so we have an eye to that, and we are beginning to prepare because there's a lot of information and data to prepare prior to their renewal process. Also, I am attending at least 4 of their board meetings. I have already attended 2 since I've started with them. We I make sure I monitor their compliance with core data submissions. They are in compliance with those. Allen Village also had an independent audit completed. I attended their board meeting in December. They too received a clean audit opinion. One of the goals for Allen Village School for next year is to look to expand to add pre-K students. For charter schools, they are able to exercise, and all public schools to exercise the 4% available to them for pre-K, and that's one of their goals. So, and finally, like I said, we are preparing for their renewal next year. Any questions?
Questions? Rita?
As part of our role through KCPS, your role in working through the KCNA closure, were they able to raise sufficient funds to cover all of the costs of the closure?
We are anticipating that there will be one outstanding bill. They are working with the vendor. Quite honestly, that vendor happens to be us. So they are working with us. They are able to do a partial payment, but they are not anticipating to be able to raise the funds because they have gotten a grant to pay us the partial payment. And so we are continuing to communicate with Linda and work with her as to what we do. Any other vendor, we are anticipating there will be no outstanding expenses owed to any other vendor.
Mr. Abarca?
Yeah, just on the money part, and this may be a Linda question. So is it typical that in those expenses that are not able to be covered, are we in that situation because we were their LEA, or how does that work in other scenarios where there's just no money and there are still bills? How does that debt, whose debt is that, I guess?
Well, technically, legally, the debt is the debt of the school, of KCNA, of the charter school. So it's not the sponsor's debt. There's not a responsibility for the sponsor to pay the debt. And this would be in any charter school circumstance. There have been varying closures for varying reasons, and this is not my first charter school closure. And for those who have had difficulties, a couple of them have been sued by their vendors, but of course when there's no funds, there's no funds. There have been other circumstances, because charter schools close for different reasons, and not all of them close due to finances. More often than not, you will see a closure due to academics or some kind of impropriety that has taken place.
I would like to ask a follow-up question on the financial aspect. For those schools that close and there are not the financial resources then to, meet all their obligations, does DESE have any role to play in that component? I mean, does DESE step in any sense on that fact, since those were public dollars that were expended?
As in stepping in to pay the outstanding
Right,
debt?
or to just oversee the dissolution of the finances. I guess their oversight is through the audit process. Is that correct?
Their oversight is through the oversight of the sponsor. The
Okay.
sponsor is key to oversight of the closure process.
Okay.
For those schools that, and like I said, there's not been many, usually what you have heard in the news, if you've heard that a charter school owes, it's usually because DESE has found something after the closure and the dissolution has already taken place. But DESE does not step in. The only owner of the debt is the corporation who is responsible for it. Now, depending on how the debt was incurred, if it's incurred in the regular course of business and there's no impropriety, then it's just the debt of the corporation. However, if there has been any noted impropriety or a board member or someone has done it on an inappropriate basis, then you potentially could have liability that extends to the board. But that, I have not seen that take place. In all the closures that have happened, there has not been where the board members of the school have been liable.
Mr. Barca?
One follow-up to the follow-up. I guess I share similar concerns, I think, of all of the colleagues in terms of the financial impact here. So I guess my question may be a little bit facetious, but something for us to seriously consider. If we serve in a sponsorship role in the future, should we also account for the potential of closure costs, whether that's set-aside dollars or something? Because if we ever get to a point of expanding where we become the sole sponsor, that could be a serious cost. And, at the whims of the state legislature and whatever they may do or not do, I'm just curious about this cost here and the fact that the debt we naturally get dumped on here and we have to pay that bill for the services that you provide. And so I'm just wondering if that is something that other states do or that other charter systems and sponsors do to protect their own assets.
Actually, there is a statute that is in place that allows for a couple of things to happen. For a charter school that is going into closing for financial reasons, there is a statute that does allow the withholding of some of the state funds, that it wouldn't directly go to the charter school, but it could be withheld in preparation for closure. Also, it is now the responsibility of the sponsors, because of this discussion throughout the years with closure, that the sponsor can put in their agreement that a charter school needs to hold a certain amount of funds in preparation for closure, just so that you do it. Historically, one of the things that I used to do or used to work with schools in doing that would potentially close is we would try to get ahead of the announcement for closure, and this is schools that I had once served as legal counsel. So if we think that the board is thinking about closure, we start working with the board immediately on a closure budget so that they are aware potential cost of a closure. At this point in time, we estimate, now Kansas City Neighborhood Academy actually has been very fiscally tight with the closure, because some of the things that schools who do have more resources that historically I've done with closure, we've not done. We've done a lot of work ourselves just to make sure that we are fiscally responsible in this. But there is typically, I tell schools that you need to be prepared for a long-term school and a K-12 school, be prepared for at least $100,000 for closure, because you don't know what expense could potentially come up. And so by holding and preparing that and to say, okay, we need to be prepared if there is an emergency, that is a plan that, yes, one, we would look at further as a sponsor, but also we do have some resources as far as DESE in being able to say, hey, we're potentially thinking about closure, or the school is, and so if the school is unable to work with us, do we communicate with DESE about can we withhold so many dollars, or ask them to withhold to prepare for closure?
Mr. Hogan?
So how much are we talking with this remaining debt that's out there?
I am anticipating, it actually is and Linda could probably talk about it more in detail, quite honestly. But I anticipate it is a preschool expense. And I think it's somewhere around $100,000 where they are 110,000, I think. And they're able to pay somewhere around 39,000. So that's where, and I think it's a pass-through, because partially KCNA was a little different than other charter schools in that the district was their LEA. And so, in a sense, the district received the school's funding first and then served as a pass-through. And so there were a number of services that KCNA contracted with the district for those services. And so, like I said, a lot of that occurred previously when it was first established. And so Linda may be able, Ms. Quinley may be able to have more detail about that.
Thanks.
My board fee. Board salary.
Thank you. I do have a question, and it could be for a future board update, or it could be in a Friday report, but I'd be interested in receiving, for the board to receive, just a summary of how many charter schools have closed in the Kansas City area, and just over the period of time, and how many of those ended up being due to financial concerns versus academic or enrollment concerns.
Definitely, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Okay,
Thank you.
We now go to the regular business items. The chair recognizes Dr. Bedell, who will introduce these items.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item that the administration is asking the board to take action on is the funding agreements with Guadalupe and Gordon Parks charter schools. In our previous board meeting, or during our board meeting in December, the board approved for all of the other charters around the MOUs regarding the funding difference. This is in the amount of $408,920.
I do have a proposed resolution, so I'm going to read that resolution, then ask for a motion and a second. The resolution is move the approval of the recommendation of the superintendent of schools to approve the individual funding agreements for Guadalupe and Gordon Parks charter schools to fulfill Kansas City Public Schools' commitment to all students in the KCPS boundaries by voluntarily bridging the fiscal year 2020 funding gap to charter schools based on the formula in section 160.415.4 and the calculation currently followed by DESE. The estimated cost for the two charter schools is $408,920 and will be funding as budgeted as a contra revenue and state funding. The estimated total cost of all 20 agreements that the board is undertaking is $2,587,422. So I would now accept a motion to that resolution.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion on the motion? Okay. Hearing none, this will be a roll call vote. The secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. There is a majority in favor, and the funding agreements have been approved.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The second item is the administration is requesting the board to take action on the second renewal contract of switched Ethernet network services in the amount of $691,807.68.
I'm going to read this resolution. The provide some additional explanation. Move the approval of the recommendation of the Superintendent of Schools to renew contract E-14005, switched Ethernet network services for an estimated amount of $691,807.68 to AT&T Corporation. This purchase is eligible for E-rate funding. If E-rate funding is awarded, the Universal Service Administrative Company Schools and Libraries Division will reimburse up to approximately $464,616.76 after the contract term is completed. It would be in order to receive a motion to that resolution.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, the secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. There is a majority in favor of renewing the AT&T Corporation contract for switched Ethernet network services.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The third item that the administration is asking the board to take action on is the Norton and Smith Consulting Engineers. This is a contract in the amount of $750,000.
Are there any questions on the motion? Mr. Abarca?
I'll wait for discussion.
All right. It would be in order to receive a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second it.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of the motion?
This may be a Linda Quinley question. I was curious about, my apologies for the delay here, about the MBWB process associated with this.
Yeah, it's my understanding that this was submitted, and we purposely targeted several organizations that represented MBE and WBEs and received 7 responses to that. We felt that the offer, at least from what was shared yesterday in our board prep yesterday morning, was our team felt that in terms of the capacity around the $750,000 and sole ownership of an MBE was not able to deliver on that. But what we did say to this company was it was our expectation that subcontracts to the smaller MBE and WBEs would be something that we expect them to participate in as we try to hit our percentages. So that was where we were with this particular contract.
There's no or what, right, in terms of the contract in itself. If they choose not to do subs that are MBE, WBE, there's no provision of anything there.
No, I think that was part of the condition when we agreed to go with them based on the explanation, because this was something we talked about yesterday in our board officers meeting.
Dr. Bedell, and I know Mr. Hogan might have a question or comment as well. It's my understanding that there are several identified subcontractors within, and some of those meet the qualifications of the minority business owners. And furthermore, can you clarify for us, I believe that Ms. Quinley had informed us that projects would still could be costed out and bidded out within that, but
That's correct.
Okay.
That's correct. And that was the response that she submitted to us via email, so yes.
Are there any additional questions about this particular proposal? All right. Hearing none, the secretary will call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion carries to approve the Norton and Schmidt Consulting Engineers Consulting Services contract.
All right. Madam Chair, this is the last item that we're asking the board to take action on, and this is to approve the vendor master's transportation in the amount of $295,120. And this is to purchase the activity buses that would be utilized at our secondary schools for extracurricular purposes.
Are there any questions on this motion? All right. This is an item that we have been having discussion about for some time, so it's taken a while to get to us, but we have anticipated this. The purpose of this agreement is to enhance our ability to serve students in their after-school and athletic
That's correct.
needs. All right.
And yeah, all of our extracurricular activities.
It would be in order to receive a motion.
So, go ahead.
So moved.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion of this motion? Hearing none, the secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. The recommendation to approve master's transportation is approved. The next items on the agenda are our consent items. It would now be in order for someone to make a motion to approve items 1 through 24 on the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion on the consent agenda as presented? Hearing no questions or discussion, the secretary will please call the roll.
Ms. Manser,
Yes.
Mr. Abarca,
Yes.
Ms. Cortez,
Yes.
Mr. Hogan,
Yes.
Dr. Jones,
Yes.
Mr. Wasserstrom,
Yes.
Ms. Wolfsey.
Yes.
Thank you. This concludes our business agenda for this evening. With this, yes, you may.
My apologies. Board Chair and Dr. Bedell, I want to applaud you all in terms of the MBWB stuff. I think it's very important that we have these types of conversation in open discussion. And specifically, I was sitting in a restaurant on 18th and Vine, and the manager of that restaurant thankfully praised us because of a very small contract for a food thing that they did with you all. And I asked them and followed up, had they ever done anything with you in the past? And she said no, and I'd love to do more things. And so it's those little community engagement components that I think are so incredibly valuable. So kudos to you and your team for that.
Well, we do listen, Mr. Wasserstrom.
And with that, this evening's meeting is adjourned. Thank you. That's okay.